Gotta show some love to Alabama's number 23. He's got a clear skill set and defined role as a 3-and-D wing. He's been a lot more consistent down the stretch of this season, and defensively, he's been miles better than before. It's a huge reason for Alabama's sneaky success this season, and it should warrant him serious draft consideration. Matthew Hurt has been a bright spot as a scorer for what is an otherwise subpar Duke team. The rest of his game, though, still needs work, especially defensively. Trendon Watford is in that group of versatile 4 men in this class. There's a definite case to be made for him being in the tier above this one. However, if he's going to be non-existent from 3, it diminishes his league chances by a lot. Talked about Mamu a ton. He's got a truly unique skill set at 6'11", 240. He can pass it, he can handle it, shoot. He's a solidified mid-second round prospect in my opinion. Scottie Lewis' sophomore season isn't exactly going as well as he would have liked it, but despite the COVID issues and the offensive struggles, I still think he's one of the better defensive prospects at that guard or smaller wing position. Now, I've done a lot of reconsidering about Luka Garza, and he's definitely worthy of a second round selection. I think I focused a bit too much on what Garza can't do rather than what he can. Not saying he is in his cancer, but we watch guys like him be effective in smaller roles, dominating in the paint during the regular season, despite being nearly unplayable in big games in the playoffs. He's a good low post scorer, and he can stretch the floor as well. While he doesn't provide you with much defensively, what he does do can help you win games. Now let's quickly recap tier 8 before we get going on the next one. Beginning tier 7, we have super athlete out of Marshall, Tavion Kinsey. Kinsey has been about as good as he's capable of being this year. He's shooting nearly 69% from the field and 57% from 3 over his last 4 games, and constantly proving he does belong in this class. While he hasn't been as productive as he was earlier in the year, Ron Harper Jr. is still a safe bet to be a contributing wing in the league. His combination of shooting, shot creation, and size make him an easy draft candidate. Oregon's Chris Duarte has finally returned to the court after being out for about a month. He's clearly still trying to get his wind back and return to that groove he was in before COVID and everything, but he's still been shooting the pill as good as anybody, and there's a good chance that gets him paid. He's not going to get a ton of praise, but Joel Ayayi is a rock-solid combo guard role player who is one of the best movers without the ball I've seen recently. His 3-point shot could be the difference between him being a second-round pick and going undrafted, but I like how he positively impacts the game in several ways. Providence's David Duke has slowed down a bit as a scorer over the last month, partly due to the attention he's been getting from defenses. But I still think he's an NBA guy at 6'5", 205, and he's got a good all-around skill set, though he's not quite the shooter I assumed he had turned into. And yes, that is his name. DJ Stewart is a guy who I think would really benefit from another year in school, but with Paolo and AJ Griffin coming in there next year, there is a possibility that he could get lost in the shuffle in that situation as well. Whatever he decides to do, Stewart is full of potential as a scoring guard. Aaron Henry has put together some really good performances over the last several weeks on a Michigan State team that isn't exactly that good. He's an elite defender, he's a really good passer at his size, and while the shot is still pretty inconsistent, I'm buying the rest of his game translating. I say Julian Champagnie probably returns to school for another year, but I think he's shown enough to get drafted if he came out this year. I think he'd have a great chance to go in the first round next year should he stay. One of the best bigs in the draft is Western Kentucky's Charles Bassey. He's solid across the board, excels at rim running, vertical spacing, and protecting the rim. He's got more potential as a scorer and as a shooter than the stats will show, but his baseline skill set easily lends itself to an NBA role. Now, Justin Champagnie is what I'd like to call a skilled energy guy. He can score both inside and out in a variety of settings, guard a couple positions, and he's a good athlete. The league is always in need of versatile wings or forwards, and Champagnie fits the bill. He feels like a borderline first, early second round guy to me if he decides to declare this year. Adding to the list of those versatile forwards, we have Pepperdine's Kessler Edwards. He's a legit 6'8" who scores with ease both inside and out, and there are only a few others who can match his ability to guard multiple positions and impact the game on defense. Now this is the tier 7 recap. There's still a lot of talent in here, and areas of the draft like this are really tough to differentiate between just knowing how good a lot of these dudes are. To me, Isaiah Livers is easily one of the better shooters in the draft. On top of that, he's got great size and an ability to get buckets off the bounce, and he makes good decisions. He's got great footwork, and a guy with his attributes always has a chance of sticking in the league. I don't know if you would call Rokas Jokubaitis an under-the-radar prospect, but he's continued his impressive play for Zalgiris in the EuroLeague. He's an accomplished lefty combo guard with a ton of potential as a shooter. Now that Terrence Clarke has officially opted to get ready for the league, I'm going to make an effort here soon to evaluate and contextualize his games this season, along with some from high school pretty soon. Expect his to be one of the first scouting reports that I finish. He's someone that I thought had lottery potential when the year started, and I bet he moves up by year's end. Isaiah Todd is another new entrant to the top 60. He's a forward who has shown much more ability on the perimeter and as a shooter than he ever did in high school. He definitely needs to improve his decision making, especially his shot selection, but overall I like what I've seen. Auburn's JT Thor is one of those players who I had basically been penciling in as a 2022 guy, but that performance against Kentucky was ridiculous and pretty much made me change my mind. He's an athletic forward with versatility both offensively and defensively. He can shoot the three, guard multiple positions, block shots, and he's just a really interesting prospect. Terrence Shannon is another fringe first round prospect. He started off the year hot from deep, making nearly 40% of his 4 attempts a game, but over the last 7 he's shooting just 20%. He's definitely made some great strides as a shooter from a year ago, but that's really the thing that's going to decide a lot for him. Florida's Tre Mann is a super crafty shot creating combo guard. While I really like his game, I'm not so sure he's someone you'll be able to count on for the volume it takes to be a lead guard in the league. That's the biggest thing that's moved him back further than he was earlier in the year. Now should he start being more assertive and take control of games down the stretch of the year, you may just see him pop back up in the 20s. Concluding tier 6, we have Jeremiah Robinson-Earl. His improvement defensively from a year ago has been pretty commendable. Outside of Omari Spellman, if you draft a player from Villanova, you're pretty much guaranteed to find someone who's going to contribute to your team in some way. In tier 5, we have a logjam of talented players that I'm still trying to differentiate between at this point. Starting with Isaiah Jackson. I like what I've seen from him lately and just his progression over the season. We know he's a super athlete and defensive menace, but he's more consistently staying out of foul trouble outside of that game against Arkansas, and the game just seems to be slowing down for him. I still feel similarly about Day'Ron Sharpe as I did when I had him in that top 20 area. He's still one of the better bigs in the class. I'm just not sure he has the overall potential as some of these other guys ranked ahead of him. I wouldn't be surprised if Davion Mitchell found his way into the first round come draft time. He doesn't have too many weak points and has a grittiness to his game that you guys know I'm a fan of. Baylor's canceled a ton of games due to COVID, but their deep run in the tournament could turn heads in Mitchell's direction. I've tempered my expectations of Josh Giddey a bit recently. He's still much more effective and full of more potential than I initially thought, but big swing factors like his shooting, assertiveness, and handle have me not as high on him as I was last time. I think he belongs more in this tier and closer to these guys than in the lottery. While Ayo Dosunmu might not be that guy who's really going to break you down and get a bucket, he's solid across the board and put on an eye-opening show against Nebraska in the clutch. Marcus Bagley has been dealing with injuries for a while now and hasn't played since late January. He's a first-round talent to me, but given his brother's injury history, it definitely gives me pause. I hadn't had Ben Mathurin on the list so far until now, mainly because I felt like he was a 2022 guy, so I kind of put him on hold. But he's done enough to warrant being a first round pick in this class. He's 6'7", one of the best shooters in the country, and has a great feel for the game off the ball. He's a good defender and athlete as well. He's still pretty inconsistent and not super comfortable with the ball in his hands, but I'm a fan. Louisville's David Johnson is included in that group of solid guards with all around skill sets riddled throughout this tier. Guys like him are a big reason I decided to make the tiers. He's high impact on both ends at the college level, and his game easily lends itself to an NBA role. Greg Brown's combination of athleticism and potential versatility is probably going to keep him in the first round despite some struggles on both ends of the court and an overall feel for the game. Now we gotta clap it up for him because he did have 4 assists in a 3-game stretch, but he is still in foul trouble pretty much every game. Now to a guy who I know is probably going to be the most controversial prospect in this class, we have Cam Thomas. He's a high volume scorer who's good for an automatic 18 points a game at this point, regardless if it takes him 20 shots to get there or not. He gets to the line at a really high rate, but he also takes some of the worst shots that I've seen this season, especially that left step back, but he makes some tough shots too. And while LSU as a collective has been pretty bad defensively, he's been really bad as an individual as well. I still think he's in that first round mix based off of his scoring ability alone, but he is certainly a gamble given the rest of his game. VCU's Bones Hyland, aka Busy, aka Mr. You Better Step Up, has been a nightmare to guard in the A10 all year long. In the last 9 games, he's averaged 22 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals. He's got some work to do on his body, but anybody who can make me watch VCU games is pretty special. Deuce McBride has been one of the more impressive guards in the country this season. He's becoming even more confident as a shooter and scorer, and it's only made him more dangerous as an overall player. He's getting to the line and the basket with more regularity, and defensively, he always brings it. Overall, he's a good leader and shows up in big moments. Alperen Sengun is one of the better bigs in the class. He's super skilled at about 6'9", 6'10", he's a crafty passer, and a solid defender despite being just a regular athlete. Roko Prkačin is easily one of the best international players in the class, and he's even picked up his play lately shooting the ball at a really high clip from deep. He's got great size and athleticism as a wing, and the necessary skill set to be a top 20 pick in this class. Josh Christopher has dealt with some injuries lately and hasn't played a full game since January 30th. He's from the Swaggy P line of descendants, both offensively and off the court, but he's got some potential defensively and as a passer. I'm still a bit skeptical of his ability to shoot, but he was trending in the right direction before the stoppage of play. Finally finishing this big tier, we have BJ Boston, and man has the BJ Boston experience been a wild ride this year. But he has slowly but surely gotten a lot better. You've got the back-to-back games against Georgia and LSU, followed up by underwhelming performances against Alabama, Missouri, and Tennessee, and then back to the good games versus Arkansas and Auburn. He's been miles better in the non-scoring department, but scoring is where most of his appeal lies. Unless he goes on an awful run down the stretch of the year, or on the flip side becomes closer to the guy we thought he was coming in, I think he's a fringe top 20 guy. Now let's take a quick look back at Tier 5. Daishen Nix is the first guy in Tier 4. Nix has showed and proved himself throughout his first few appearances in the G League. He needs to get in better shape and work on some things defensively and show more consistency as a shooter, but I think I've pretty much seen enough from him to warrant being at least in this tier. He's a high IQ guy, big time playmaker, and he's responding great to the pressure that some of these G League veterans have put on him. Jared Butler has been great all season long, and what he brings to the table is evident on a nightly basis, even on a team that's as talented as this Baylor one is. He's a gifted shot creator, he more than holds his own defensively, and has made great improvements as a passer, specifically in the pick and roll and in other areas. Outside of the top guys, Kai Jones has about as much raw potential as anybody in the class. Considering his growth curve from just a year ago, he's a much different player, and I expect him to continue to improve in a big way. He's one of the most versatile bigs in the class, and has really high potential in a lot of areas. Sharife Cooper is at 16. Until the recent feedback, I actually thought I was higher on Sharife than other people would be, but it turns out to be the opposite. I just don't know if he's a good enough shooter or scorer to be a mid-lottery guy, on top of the fact that he's maybe 6 feet tall. It's not hard to tell what he does bring to the table, but the concerns for his impact off the ball and being a high usage guy are there. And in saying all of this, he's still probably my favorite player to watch in college basketball this year. Franz Wagner and his Michigan squad hadn't played in almost 3 weeks before that win against Wisconsin. Wagner has grown on me even more, and I think he's probably a little closer to the fringe lottery guy than in the 20s like I had him previously. He does a lot of things well, and it seems like he's frequently in the right spot, and he's always making winning plays. Usman Garuba is an elite defensive prospect, if nothing else. The rest of his game is still super raw, but the energy, effort, and versatility is something that belongs in this tier, in my opinion. The quintessential 3-and-D guy is Corey Kispert. He's experienced, good leader, and does his job at a really consistently high level. Where he goes will depend on the order and the situation of the teams, but it's going to be hard for a team in need of wing shooting to pass him up. James Bouknight just made his return to the court against Providence, and he didn't miss a beat after being out several games with an elbow injury. He's a gifted scoring guard with a nice pace to his game, and one of my personal favorite players in the class. And finally, at the end of this section, we have Duke's Jalen Johnson. Johnson officially decided to forego the rest of his freshman season to rehab and get ready for the draft. All the concerns about his game sort of came to the forefront at once, mostly due to that injury. Given his high school situations, he's also a candidate to move back a few spots. I still do like his potential at times. Tier 3 is started off with Scottie Barnes. Kind of going back and forth on Scottie Barnes, but he's no doubt in this tier or at least the previous one. He has a unique ability to guard multiple positions, handle the rock, and pass the ball at a legit 6'9". I always talk about it, but his passion and energy on the court goes a long way for a team. At 9 we have Keon Johnson. I had been waiting to see a little bit more out of the Tennessee freshman tandem, and boy have they shown off lately. Johnson is a super athletic wing who is still pretty raw offensively, but the flashes are there. I have little doubt he'll be impactful on that end in some way throughout his career. Next is Stanford's Zaire Williams. He's recently returned to the court after being out since January 16th. The rust is apparent, but he's still been able to make a contribution to his team. He's one of the high risk and even higher reward guys in this class, but I like his skill set and potential. There aren't a ton of 6'8", 19-year-olds who can create shots, pass, and defend in the ways that he does. Number 7 is Jaden Springer. Like I mentioned with Keon Johnson, Springer has really gotten comfortable lately and shown a level of scoring that I didn't think he was really capable of yet. He hit Kentucky, Georgia, and LSU with an average of 25 a game and did so on 57, 50, 80 shooting splits. He's a dog of a defender who imposes his will physically on both ends and has staying power in this top 10 to top 12 area. And rounding off this tier is Arkansas's Moses Moody. I've watched almost every Moses Moody game this year, and to me, he's pretty much everything you want from a modern wing. I really wish he got the ball more because there are a ton of moments where his teammates just completely forget he exists, and Moody still goes out and gets you 14 to 16 points while playing solid defense. He's got a high floor as a 3-and-D guy who is capable of expanding his game. Now we finally reached the top 5 in the final 2 tiers. Right now, tier 2 includes 3 players, those being Jalen Green, Jalen Suggs, and Jonathan Kuminga. I just happen to like their potential and skill sets a bit more than those in the last tier. Even though a guy like Jalen Green has some flaws, I think he comes with a dynamicity that pretty much no one else in this class has the potential to reach. He started off slow in that first game with the Ignite, but since then he's hit the ground running and has made his presence felt in the G League. If you're 18, just turned 19 years old, learning the game, and still able to get off and showcase your skill set in the way Green has, you're a top 10 guy at worst. And then we've got Jalen Suggs, who has been a great model of consistency throughout the year for one of the best teams in the country. He won't end up with gaudy stats, but he's displayed an all-around skill set and athletic profile that's perfect for the next level. Finishing off this trio in tier 2, we've got Jonathan Kuminga. Kuminga has performed pretty well so far in the G League bubble. He's already one of the most physically imposing players out there, and has showcased his entire arsenal from on and off ball defense to ball handling and playmaking and scoring from all 3 levels of the court. He's got some work to do as a shooter and as a ball handler, but given the confidence that he's had shooting them, I know he'll improve. He's pretty much cemented himself as a top 5 player in this draft for me. Now in this last tier, we have who I think are the 2 best prospects in this class. I probably put Cade in a tier of his own, but I felt like that was a little extra for something I could explain, right here in just a few seconds. Y'all be sure to let me know when Evan Mobley has a bad game. He's exactly what you want out of a modern big man, and there's still so much potential he can unlock. Depending on how quickly he develops physically, I think he could shock some doubters as soon as he gets in the league with NBA spacing and teammates who actually look to pass him the ball. And lastly, the guy who is most likely going to be the number 1 pick, Cade Cunningham. You guys know what he can do, and his skill set matches his intangibles. If he goes really hard and has a primary focus on improving his handle this offseason, it could get scary from the jump. That's the one thing that really hampers him outside of being just a regular athlete. Those moments in the second half at TCU before he had an uncharacteristic mental mistake really showed the dog in him as a player. He responded to overrated chants in a huge way, completely dominating that half, and did a lot of talking to the crowd and his opponents chirping on the bench. That type of stuff from a guy who's usually really mild-mannered is the stuff I'd like to see out of those at the very top. Appreciate you guys for watching the video. Hopefully the tiers helped you out a little bit more. Be on the lookout for more NBA-centric content, possibly some on-court stuff, especially on my Instagram. along with a few of the new and improved scouting reports coming really soon. I'm working hard on making these new scouting reports look, feel, and inform better than anything I've created.